They told you to work harder. They told you to stay positive. They told you to be patient. And where did that get you? Still waiting. Still watching others win. Still wondering why your mind feels like it's running through mud while everyone around you seems to operate on a different frequency. Here's the truth they never gave you. Your mind is not broken. It's been kept dull. On purpose. A sharp mind is dangerous. A focused man is unstoppable. And the world does not reward the unfocused. It uses them. Today, that changes. What you're about to hear is not motivation. Motivation is for people who need someone else to move them. This is architecture. We are rebuilding how you think, how you process, how you strike. Machiavelli didn't win through kindness. He won through clarity. Ruthless, cold, unshakable, mental clarity. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly how the sharpest minds in history thought, operated, and dominated. Before we begin, drop Machiavellian mind in the comments right now. Let me know you're ready to be forged. Part 1. The war inside your skull. Most men will never win the war that matters most. And that war is not fought in boardrooms, not in streets, not in arguments with enemies. It is fought in the 6 inches between your ears, every single morning, before the world even knows you are awake. Your mind is the battlefield, and right now, if you are being honest with yourself, you are losing. You wake up, scattered. You pick up your phone before you pick up your purpose. You react before you reflect. You let noise in before you have even established silence. And that is not weakness. That is what happens to a man who has never been taught to command himself before attempting to command anything else. Machiavelli understood something that most men in his era refused to accept, and most men in this era still refuse to accept, that the greatest threat to your power is never your enemy outside, it is the chaos you allow to live inside. A distracted mind is an obedient mind, obedient to whoever feeds it the most stimulation, obedient to algorithms, to drama, to fear, to noise. The man who cannot sit in silence and direct his own thinking is not a free man. He is a puppet who has simply never looked up to see the strings. Today you begin cutting those strings. Today you declare war on your own mental chaos. And in that war, there is no mercy, no days off, and absolutely no surrender. Part 2. The sharpness of the predator. There is a reason the lion does not chase every animal it sees on the plain. And that reason is not laziness. It is not weakness. It is not fear. It is precision. The predator understands something the prey will never understand. And that is the brutal, non-negotiable relationship between focus and power. Every ounce of energy spent on the wrong target is energy stolen from the right one. Every moment of attention given to irrelevant noise is a moment of sharpness surrendered to dullness. And dullness, in this world, is not just inefficiency. Dullness is death. Not the kind of death they write on gravestones, but the slower, quieter death of a man who had potential and buried it under distraction, under comfort, under the endless scroll of other people's lives. Machiavelli wrote that men are driven by 2 forces, fear and love. But what he observed in the truly powerful was something beyond both. It was control. Not control over others first, but control over the self. The sharpest rulers, the most dangerous strategists, the men who moved history like pieces on a board, they all shared one uncommon trait that ordinary men dismissed as coldness, as arrogance, as detachment. That trait was the ability to think without emotion hijacking the process, to observe without immediately reacting, to calculate while everyone else was feeling. That is not inhumanity. That is the highest form of mental discipline a man can achieve. Your emotions are information, not instructions. The weak man obeys every feeling the moment it arrives. The sharp man receives the feeling, processes it, and then decides, consciously, deliberately, strategically, what action, if any, it deserves. That gap between stimulus and response, That tiny, almost invisible gap is where your entire future lives. That gap is where empires were built and where wars were won before a single soldier moved. Train that gap. Widen it. Protect it with everything you have, because the man who controls that space controls his destiny absolutely and without apology. Drop predator mindset in the comments if you feel this in your core. Part 3. The architecture of a dangerous mind. You have been sold a lie so convincing, so deeply embedded in the culture around you, that most men accept it as natural law without ever stopping to question its origin or its purpose. And that lie is this: that intelligence is something you are born with, that sharpness is a gift given to a selected few, that the men who operate at elite mental levels simply arrived there by fortune, by genetics, by divine selection, while you were standing in a different line when those gifts were handed out. That lie is the most effective cage ever constructed, because it requires no locks, no guards, no walls. It simply requires that you believe it, and the moment you believe it, you imprison yourself more completely than any external force ever could. The truth, the cold and liberating truth that Machiavelli and every dangerous mind in history understood, is that mental sharpness is not discovered, it is built. It is architected. It is constructed through deliberate choices made consistently over time, in the same way that a fortress is not wished into existence, but laid stone by stone with intention, with patience, and with an absolute refusal to settle for anything less than impregnability. The architecture of a dangerous mind begins with what you allow in. Every piece of information you consume is either sharpening you or dulling you. There is no neutral input. There is no harmless noise. There is no such thing as content that simply passes through without leaving a mark. Every hour you spend consuming chaos is an hour spent weakening the very instrument you need to navigate a world that is designed to exploit the weak and reward the precise. The men who built empires, who rewrote the rules of power, who moved through the world like surgeons rather than brawlers, they were obsessive curators of their own mental environment. They chose their inputs the way a general chooses his battlefield, with extreme prejudice, with strategic intention, and with the full understanding that the wrong environment makes even the strongest mind vulnerable. That input is only the first layer. The second layer is output, meaning what you do with what enters your mind. A sharp mind does not merely receive information, it interrogates it. It asks who benefits from this narrative. It asks what assumption is buried beneath this claim. It asks what is not being said as loudly as what is. This is the Machiavellian mode of thinking, not paranoia, not cynicism, but ruthless, disciplined critical analysis applied to everything without exception and without sentiment. You do not have to be cruel to think this way. You have to be honest, and in a world addicted to comfortable lies, that kind of honesty is the sharpest weapon in existence. Part 4. Silence is the language of power. Every man who has ever held real power, lasting power, the kind of power that does not evaporate the moment the room changes or the circumstances shift, every single one of them understood something that the loud, the reactive, and the emotionally driven will never grasp. And that is the absolute, weaponized, strategic value of silence. Not the silence of a man who has nothing to say, not the silence of weakness or timidity or social anxiety. The silence of a man who has so much calculated behind his eyes that words would only diminish it. The silence of a predator who knows that the moment you reveal your thoughts, you hand your opponent the map to your mind. And a man with the map to your mind is a man who can navigate around you, anticipate you, neutralize you, before you even realize the game has already been played and lost. Machiavelli was explicit about this in ways that made the powerful uncomfortable and the powerless oblivious. He wrote that men judge more by appearance than by reality, and that the prince who masters the art of appearing without fully revealing holds an insurmountable advantage over the man who makes himself entirely readable in the name of authenticity or transparency. Understand what this means in the context of your mind and your daily life. Every time you speak before you think, You are not being real, you are being reckless. Every time you share your plans before they are executed, you are not being open, you are being strategically naive. Every time you react loudly to provocation, you are not being strong, you are being controlled. And the person who provoked you knows it, and they are using it, and you are handing them leverage with both hands, while calling it passion. The sharpest men in any room are rarely the loudest. They are the ones whose eyes are moving while everyone else's mouths are moving. They are processing, filing, calculating, building a complete picture of every person, every dynamic, every hidden agenda operating beneath the surface of the conversation, while the performers and the reactors exhaust themselves chasing attention that leads nowhere. Silence is not emptiness. It is density. It is the weight of a mind so full of strategic thought that it cannot be bothered to leak that thought carelessly into the air for anyone to intercept. When you train yourself to sit in silence, to become comfortable in it, to use it as your default rather than your last resort, something extraordinary begins to happen to your mind. The noise that once felt necessary starts to feel like poison. The compulsion to fill every gap in conversation starts to reveal itself as the insecurity it always was. You begin to see that most human communication is not the exchange of ideas. It is the performance of emotion, the seeking of validation, the broadcasting of insecurity dressed in confident language. And once you see that, you cannot unsee it, and you will never again spend your mental energy the same wasteful way. You will guard your silence the way a general guards his most fortified position, because you will finally understand that your silence is not absence, it is your greatest presence, your most commanding statement, and your most impenetrable defense against a world that profits from keeping you reactive, readable, and permanently exposed. Drop silent power in the comments if this is changing how you see everything. Part 5. The elimination of the weak thought. There is a war being waged inside your mind every single day, and unlike the wars you read about in history books, this one leaves no visible bodies, no traceable destruction, no obvious evidence of defeat. It simply leaves a man who once had fire, slowly becoming a man who has excuses, a man who once had vision slowly becoming a man who has complaints, a man who once stood at the edge of his potential and looked out at it with hunger, slowly becoming a man who has made peace with a life far beneath what he was capable of building. And the most terrifying part of this process is that it happens so gradually, so quietly, so convincingly dressed as maturity and realism and practicality, that most men never even register the moment they surrendered. The weak thought is not always loud. It does not always announce itself as doubt or fear or limitation. Sometimes it arrives dressed as logic. Sometimes it arrives wearing the face of a friend who tells you to be careful, to be realistic, to not get too far ahead of yourself. Sometimes it arrives in the quiet of the night when you are alone with your ambitions, and a voice, your own voice, begins to build a case for why the risk is too great, why the timing is wrong, why someone like you, from where you come from, with what you have, should probably just be grateful for what already exists, rather than reaching for what could exist. That voice is not wisdom. That voice is the accumulated weight of every rejection, every failure, every moment someone made you feel small, every system that was designed to produce compliance rather than power. And it has been sitting in the architecture of your thinking for so long that you have mistaken it for your own perspective, when in reality, it is the perspective of every force that ever had an interest in keeping you exactly where you are. Machiavelli understood the psychology of self-limitation better than almost any philosopher of his age, because he lived inside a political world where the most effective chains were never physical. They were mental. They were social. They were the invisible agreements men made with their own inferiority that kept them manageable, predictable, and permanently beneath the men who had learned to think without those chains. He watched princes fall, not because their enemies were stronger, but because their own thinking was weaker, because they entertained doubts at the moments that demanded certainty, because they hesitated at the moments that demanded movement, because they explained and justified and second-guessed themselves into paralysis while the world moved around them and left them standing in the wreckage of opportunities they talked themselves out of taking. The elimination of the weak thought is not about becoming arrogant. It is not about delusion or the blind rejection of reality. It is about developing the ruthless mental discipline to identify every thought that shrinks you, every internal narrative that serves limitation rather than expansion, every belief that was handed to you by someone who was themselves imprisoned, and then making a conscious, deliberate, non-negotiable decision to starve those thoughts of the attention they need to survive. Because thoughts, like all living things, require feeding. The weak thought grows stronger every time you entertain it, every time you give it airtime in the courtroom of your mind, every time you let it present its case without challenge, without cross-examination, without the cold prosecutorial force of a mind that has decided it will no longer be complicit in its own diminishment. You must become the most hostile environment possible for any thought that does not serve your assent. You must learn to catch the weak thought at the gate, identify it immediately for what it is, and dismiss it not with emotional resistance, but with the calm, almost bored authority of a man who has simply decided that certain things no longer have access to him. That decision, that single sovereign decision about what you will and will not allow to take root in your mind, is the beginning of a kind of mental power that most men around you will never develop, never understand, and never be able to touch, because it lives in a place so deep inside your own. Sovereignty that no external force, no circumstance, no person, and no system can reach it without your permission. Part 6. The cold clarity of strategic thinking. There is a quality possessed by the most dangerous minds in history that is almost universally misunderstood by the people who observe it from the outside. And that quality is what I am going to call cold clarity, a state of thinking so precise, so uncontaminated by sentiment, by ego, by the desperate human need for things to be other than they are, that it allows a man to see reality not as he wishes it to be, not as he fears it might be, but exactly, surgically, ruthlessly as it actually is, and then to act on that reality with the kind of decisive, calculated force that separates the men who shape history from the men who are simply carried along by it like debris in a current they never learned to navigate. Most men do not think, they feel, and then they construct thoughts around those feelings to justify what the feeling already decided, which means that the majority of human reasoning is not reasoning at all, but rationalization, a sophisticated and convincing performance of logic that is actually just emotion wearing an expensive suit. And the man who does not understand this about himself is permanently at the mercy of his own unexamined interior, making decisions he believes are strategic when they are actually emotional, taking positions he believes are principled when they are actually ego-driven, avoiding actions he tells himself are unwise when the truth is he is simply afraid and has built an elaborate intellectual case for that fear so that he never has to confront it directly or honestly. Machiavelli's entire philosophical framework was built on one foundational demand: see things as they are, not as you want them to be, because the gap between those two perceptions is where every political failure, every strategic miscalculation, every catastrophic defeat in the history of human power has been born and nurtured and eventually unleashed. He watched rulers destroy themselves, not through lack of resources, not through lack of allies, not through lack of intelligence in the conventional sense, but through the consistent, stubborn, almost willful refusal to accept reality on reality's terms rather than on the terms their emotions, their pride, or their wishful thinking preferred. And this is not ancient history. This is happening around you right now, today, in every boardroom, every relationship, every personal ambition being pursued or abandoned, by men who have never learned the discipline of seeing clearly, because no one ever taught them that clarity is a skill, that it must be developed, that it atrophies without practice, just like any physical muscle, and that a man who has not trained his perception to cut through his own bias is operating with a fundamentally compromised instrument, no matter how educated he is, no matter how experienced he is, no matter how confident he feels in the moment of decision. Cold clarity begins with a practice that is simple to describe and extraordinarily difficult to execute. And that practice is the complete and total separation of what you want to be true from what the evidence actually demonstrates to be true. It means sitting with uncomfortable information without immediately reaching for the mental mechanism that makes it less uncomfortable. It means looking at a failing strategy and calling it failing before the damage becomes irreversible rather than after. It means looking at a person in your life and seeing them as they consistently behave rather than as you need them to be for your own emotional convenience. It means looking at yourself, and this is the hardest part, the part where most men turn away, with the same unflinching, unsentimental, forensic honesty that you would apply to an enemy. Because the man who cannot diagnose his own weaknesses with precision will always be blindsided by them at the worst possible moment, always be exploited through them by people who identified them long before he did, always be limited by ceilings he could have broken through if he had only been willing to see them clearly and address them directly and without the protective layer of self-deception that feels like self-respect but is actually self-sabotage dressed in dignified clothing. Strategic thinking built on cold clarity does not mean you become emotionless. It means you become the master of when and how emotion enters your decision-making rather than its permanent, helpless servant. It means you develop the capacity to feel something fully and still choose to act on calculation rather than impulse when the stakes demand it. It means you can be moved without being swept away, affected without being destabilized, engaged without being consumed. And that combination of deep feeling held under disciplined control is not coldness. It is the highest expression of masculine mental power available to a human being, a state where your intelligence and your will operate in complete alignment, unobstructed by the noise of unmanaged emotion, uncontaminated by the distortions of ego and wishful thinking, pointed with absolute precision at the reality in front of you and the outcome you have decided, with full sovereign authority to create. This is the mode that kings operated in. This is the mode that conquerors thought in. This is the mode that the world has always feared in men who possessed it, because a man who sees clearly and acts decisively on what he sees is a man who cannot be easily manipulated, cannot be easily misled, cannot be kept in a comfortable confusion that serves everyone else's agenda but his own. And a man who cannot be manipulated is a man who is genuinely, structurally, fundamentally free in a way that no external circumstance can grant or revoke. Drop cold clarity in the comments right now if you are ready to start seeing the world without the filter of your own illusions. Part 7. The Untouchable Man. There is a category of man that exists in every era, in every civilization, in every room and every arena where power is contested and futures are decided. A category so rare that most people have never encountered one in their lifetime and would not fully recognize one even if they did, because the untouchable man does not announce himself with noise or spectacle or the desperate performance of strength that insecure men mistake for power. He announces himself with something far more unsettling, far more commanding, far more permanent, and that something is an absolute, unshakable, almost gravitational sense of self that does not expand when praised and does not contract when attacked, that does not brighten in the presence of approval and does not dim in the presence of hostility, that simply exists at a constant, immovable frequency, that the world must eventually adjust to rather than the other way round. And the moment you encounter a man operating at that frequency, you feel it before you understand it. You respond to it before you can explain it. because it triggers something ancient and instinctual in the human psyche. That recognizes, on a level beneath language and conscious thought, that this is a man who has completed a war inside himself, that most men never even begin. The untouchable man is not untouchable because nothing can reach him. It is because nothing can move him from himself. Understand that distinction completely, because it is everything. Weakness pretends to be untouchable by building walls, by shutting down, by becoming numb and unavailable and emotionally fortified against any incoming signal that might cause discomfort. That is not power. That is a prison with better architecture. The truly untouchable man is fully present, fully aware, fully capable of receiving the full spectrum of human experience, including pain, including loss, including betrayal, including failure, and none of it, not one single force that life can direct at him, can dislodge him from the centered, sovereign, internally governed place from which he operates. He can be hit and not fall. He can be criticized and not crumble. He can be abandoned and not unravel. He can fail and not collapse his entire identity around that failure, because his identity is not built on outcomes, not built on other people's perceptions, not built on the fragile external conditions that the world can revoke at any moment without warning or permission. His identity is built on something the world cannot touch: his values, his discipline, his relationship with his own mind, and his absolute refusal to outsource his internal state to anything outside his control. Machiavelli studied power with the precision of a surgeon and the patience of a strategist, and what he consistently identified in the men who maintained power across time, across changing circumstances, across betrayal and misfortune and the relentless volatility of political life, was brilliance alone, not resources alone, not connections alone. It was this quality of psychological immovability, this capacity to remain fundamentally themselves, regardless of what the external environment demanded, or threatened, or offered. Because a man who can be destabilized can be controlled. And a man who can be controlled will eventually be discarded once he has served whatever purpose his controller required of him. To become untouchable, you must first identify every place where you are currently touchable. Every place where external validation is secretly running your behavior. Every place where the fear of disapproval is quietly making your decisions. Every place where your mood is being governed by circumstances rather than by conscious internal choice. And you must be willing to look at those places without flinching, without excuse, without the comfortable self-narrative that tells you those vulnerabilities are just personality traits or reasonable human responses rather than the open gates through which manipulation enters your life and redirects your energy toward other people's purposes. This is the work that separates the men who talk about power from the men who actually possess it. Because anyone can read about strength, anyone can perform confidence in the moments when everything is going well and the environment is friendly and the stakes are low, but the untouchable man reveals himself in the moments of maximum pressure, in the moments when every external signal is telling him to react, to collapse, to seek comfort, to abandon his position, and he remains immovable, unreadable, and absolutely, terrifyingly in command of himself, and therefore of everything around him. Part 8. The Power of Controlled Obsession. Every man who has ever built something extraordinary, every man whose name has echoed beyond his lifetime, every man who has looked at the raw material of his circumstances and transformed it into something that defied the expectations of. Everyone around him, every single one of those men, shared a quality that polite society has always tried to pathologize, to medicate, to soften into something more socially comfortable and less threatening to the mediocre majority. And that quality is obsession, not the chaotic, unfocused self-destructive obsession of a man running from himself, but the cold, directed, architecturally precise obsession of a man running towards something so specific, so clearly defined, so deeply embedded in the core of his identity, that every waking hour becomes a resource to be deployed toward it. And every distraction becomes an enemy to be neutralized with the same urgency and the same ruthlessness that a general applies to a threat on the battlefield. The world will tell you that balance is the highest virtue, that a well-rounded life is the mark of wisdom, that the man who spreads his attention evenly across all domains of existence is somehow more evolved than the man who concentrates his entire being like a laser on a single point of impact. And the world is wrong, demonstrably, historically, repeatedly wrong. Because every monument of human achievement you have ever stood in front of, every work of art that has ever stopped you in your tracks, every business empire that has ever reshaped an industry, every philosophical framework that has ever changed how civilization thinks, every single one of those things was produced not by a balanced man, but by an obsessed one, a man so consumed by his vision that the concept of moderation was not a virtue he practiced, but a limitation he refused, a ceiling he declined to acknowledge. A suggestion made by people who had already made peace with their own smallness and needed him to make the same peace so that his existence would stop being an uncomfortable reminder of what total commitment actually produces. Machiavelli himself was a man of controlled obsession, obsessed with understanding power so completely, so anatomically, so without the distortion of moral sentimentality that he could describe its mechanics with a clarity that has survived 5 centuries and still reads like it was written last week. Because obsession pursued with discipline does not age, does not become irrelevant, does not fade the way the output of half-committed men fades the moment the circumstances that produced it change. The key word, the word that separates the man who is controlled by his obsession from the man who controls it, is discipline. Because obsession without discipline is addiction, is chaos, is the man who burns bright for a season and then burns out completely, leaving nothing behind but the memory of potential that was never properly governed, never properly channeled, never aimed with the precision that transforms raw intensity into lasting impact. Controlled obsession means you have identified the one thing, the central mission, the organizing principle of your ambition, and you have built your entire life, your schedule, your relationships, your consumption of information, your management of energy, around the relentless, unapologetic pursuit of that one thing with every resource available to you. It means you have made a decision, a sovereign and irrevocable decision, that your focus is not a common resource to be distributed generously to whoever requests it, but a rare and precious weapon to be aimed with extreme prejudice at the target that deserves it most. It means you wake up every morning already at war, already in motion, already operating from the understanding that the hours of this day are not to be passed through, but to be conquered, not to be survived, but to be dominated with the full, concentrated, terrifying force of a mind that knows exactly what it wants and has decided, without apology and without negotiation, that it will have it. Drop obsessed and disciplined in the comments if you are ready to go all in on your mission. Part 9. The Mask and the Mind. There is a dimension of Machiavellian intelligence that the uninitiated consistently misread, consistently reduced to something simpler and more comfortable than it actually is. And that dimension is the relationship between the face you present to the world and the mind operating silently behind it. Because Machiavelli did not teach deception as an end in itself, did not celebrate manipulation as a personality trait, did not advocate for the hollow performance of a man who has nothing genuine beneath the surface he projects. What he identified with the forensic precision of a man who had studied power at its most naked and its most brutal was that the world does not respond to your interior reality, it responds to your projected reality. And the man who understands this and masters it is not being dishonest, he is being strategically intelligent in a social environment that has always, in every culture and every era, rewarded the management of perception as much as or more than the possession of actual substance. Every interaction you have is a stage, not in the cynical sense that nothing is real, but in the strategic sense that you are always, whether you acknowledge it or not, presenting a version of yourself to the world. And the only question is whether that presentation is conscious and deliberate and serving your interests, or unconscious and reactive and serving everyone else's assumptions about who you are and what you are capable of and how far you can be pushed before you break. The untrained man leaks. He leaks his fears in the way he over-explains himself. He leaks his insecurities in the way he seeks validation from people whose opinion should be irrelevant to him. He leaks his desperation in the way he moves too fast when opportunity appears. He leaks his anger in the way he responds to provocation before he has calculated the cost of that response. And every leak is a piece of intelligence handed freely to a world that will use it, that has always used it, that is in fact constantly scanning every man it encounters for exactly these leaks, because the knowledge of what moves a man, what frightens a man, what a man cannot resist or cannot withstand, is the most valuable strategic currency in any human environment. Machiavelli's prince was not a robot. He was a master of calibration, a man who understood precisely when to show warmth and when to show coldness, when to be generous and when to withhold, when to speak and when to deploy the devastating power of silence, when to appear vulnerable in a way that disarms and when to appear impenetrable in a way that commands. And the operative word in every one of those calculations is when, because the mask is not a permanent replacement for the self, but a precision instrument deployed at the precise moment it serves the mission and withdrawn the moment it does not. To master the mask without losing the mind behind it requires a level of self-knowledge so deep and so honest that most men will never achieve it, because you cannot strategically manage your presentation to the world if you do not know with absolute clarity who you actually are beneath that presentation, what you actually value, what you actually stand for, what lines you will not cross, regardless of the strategic convenience of crossing them. Because the man who loses himself entirely in his own performance has not mastered the mask, he has been consumed by it. And a man consumed by his own performance is the most vulnerable creature in any room, dependent on the audience for his sense of reality, collapsing the moment the applause stops, empty at the center, where his sovereign self should have been standing all along, immovable and undeceived and completely, ruthlessly his own. Part 10. The ascension begins now. Everything you have heard in this video, every principle, every layer of Machiavellian intelligence, every dimension of mental sharpness and cold clarity and controlled obsession and psychological untouchability that has been laid before you in these last few minutes, none of it means a single thing, not one word, not one idea, not one insight carries any weight whatsoever, unless you make a decision right now, in this moment, before this video ends and the next distraction arrives and the comfortable gravity of your old patterns pulls you back into the exact same mental posture you were sitting in before you pressed play. And that decision is simply this: that you are done being a passenger in your own life, done being acted upon by a world that has absolutely no interest in your awakening, done consuming wisdom as entertainment rather than as instruction, done nodding along to truth and then returning to the habits that contradict everything you just agreed with. Because the graveyard of human potential is not filled with men who never encountered the right ideas, it is filled with men who encountered every right idea at the right moment and then did absolutely nothing with it. Because the doing required something that the consuming never did. It required the willingness to be uncomfortable, to be unrecognized during the building phase, to operate in the dark, without applause, without validation, without the external confirmation that what you are doing matters before the results arrive to confirm it themselves. Machiavelli did not write for the masses, he wrote for the rare man, the man capable of receiving dangerous truth without flinching, without sanitizing it into something more palatable, without immediately reaching for the moral objection that is really just the ego protecting itself from the discomfort of radical self-responsibility, And if you have watched this far, if you have sat with every uncomfortable idea in this video without turning away, then you are already demonstrating something that most men around you are not capable of demonstrating: the willingness to look directly at the mechanics of power and the architecture of the mind without the protective layer of illusion that makes ordinary life feel safe and manageable and sufficient. That willingness is not the destination, it is the entry point, the first gate of a path that demands more from you every single day, that never becomes comfortable, that never stops requiring your full presence and your full commitment and your full sovereign authority over the one instrument. That determines everything else in your existence, which is your mind. Sharpen it daily. Guard it ferociously. Feed it with precision and starve it of everything that dulls it, weakens it, or pulls it back toward the mediocrity that the world constantly and aggressively markets as normalcy. Remember that the world does not lack information. It lacks men with the mental discipline to transform information into power, into action, into the kind of compounding momentum that makes a life look, from the outside, like destiny, when from the inside it is nothing more and nothing less than the result of a man who decided, on an ordinary day, that he would think differently, act differently, and refuse with every fiber of his being to be ordinary in a world that manufactures ordinariness on an industrial scale. You are not here to be managed. You are not here to be comfortable. You are not here to consume and scroll and react and drift through decades, wondering what might have been possible if you had only committed fully to the sharpness that was always available to you. You are here to ascend. And the ascension begins now. Drop "I am Machiavellian" in the comments if this video changed something in you today, if something shifted, if something woke up that is not going back to sleep, and if this content speaks to the part of you that is done settling, done drifting, done operating below your own standard. Then like this video, subscribe to Machiavellian Mode, and turn on notifications. Because what is coming next will go even deeper, cut even sharper, and take your mind to levels that most men will never have the courage to reach.